As Chris mentioned, I am Brittany Kalicki, and I am one of the BCBAs and Master Trainers here at QBS. And today we're going to be talking about behavioral momentum. So the purpose of today's training is threefold. First, we're talking about behavioral momentum because uncooperativeness is one of the most commonly reported challenging behaviors. Also, studies have shown that increased cooperation has been associated with the decrease in challenging behavior. And also, research shows that reduced uncooperativeness has been associated with the increase in appropriate behavior. Okay, so today we're going to talk about a strategy that you can use to increase cooperation. There are lots of ways to address uncooperativeness, but one way is to modify the way in which we make requests. There's a number of ways to make requests, but when individuals are uncooperative or difficult, it may be helpful to begin with some simple requests before that difficult target request. So our focus today in this quick webinar is to, one, learn what is behavior momentum. Two, talk about what effect does behavioral momentum have on cooperation. Learn how behavioral momentum can be used with the individuals you work with, and talk about practical considerations when using behavioral momentum. So let's start with that first point. Let's talk about what is behavioral momentum. Behavioral momentum is an antecedent intervention in which 2 to 5 easy tasks with a known history of learner compliance and cooperation are presented in quick succession immediately before requesting that target task or that more difficult task. So behavioral momentum may also be referred to as high probability or a high P request sequence. What that means is that high P or high probability requests are commands that are easy for an individual. There's a probability, the probability is high that the individual will cooperate with the command or the request that you're delivering. Whereas a low probability command is a difficult command, which the probability is low in which they'll cooperate. So that's the first thing it could also be referred to. Behavioral momentum could also be referred to as interspersed requests or as pre-task requests. So it's time for our first question. What is another name for behavioral momentum? A, high probability or high P request sequence. B, interspersed requests. C, pre-task requests. Or D, all of the above. No. Everyone's right. D, all of the above. There are a few different names for behavioral momentum. So we talked about what behavioral momentum is. Now let's take a look at what it looks like in practice. Typically when you're giving directions, individuals just make the request and they don't take into account the difficulty of the request, and they typically don't build momentum to increase the chance of cooperation. So if we know that an individual has a hard time putting on a shirt, a typical request would just be, hey, it's time to get dressed, put on your shirt. With behavioral momentum, though, we're going to give some easy commands prior to that difficult demand of putting on a shirt. So here's what it looks like. The target behavior is put on shirt. The adult's going to say, hey, give me a high five. The student gives you a high five, and the adult says, great, here, take this ball. The student takes the ball. The adult says, awesome, now put on your shirt. And then the student puts on their shirt. There were easy commands delivered first before that difficult command of putting on your shirt. Another example could be you have a student and you say, hey, how's it going? And they look up and they look at you and you say, nice looking, give me a high five. They give you a high five. You reply with, that's so awesome, clean up your toys. You deliver that low probability request of them cleaning up their toys after you've given some easy high probability requests. So let's take a look at a video of what it looks like in real life.
Hey everybody, this is my daughter Emma. Emma, say hi. Hi. As you all know, Emma has a diagnosis of ASD, and today we are going to demonstrate a behavioral strategy known as behavioral momentum that helps your clients with non-compliance issues. Emma here has non-compliance issues when it comes to identifying shapes. So my husband and her are going to demonstrate to you how effective this strategy can be. Okay? Yeah. Say bye-bye. Bye. What shape? What shape? What shape? I don't know. Okay, so Emma, look at me. Touch your nose. Oh, good job. Touch your forehead. Oh, good job. Do this. Good job. Rub your belly. Oh, good job. And what shape is this? It's a what? Good job. Yay! Emma, touch your nose. Oh, good job. Rub your belly. Oh, good job. Touch your forehead. Good job. Do this. Oh, good job. What shape? Good job. Yeah. The puzzle.
So in this example, the dad started with delivering a demand, as most people do, where they just deliver the request that they're looking for, identifying a shape. So he held it up and said, what shape? The little girl in this video didn't cooperate. We saw her kind of flopping on the ground, her saying, I don't know. Then when they implemented behavioral momentum, he delivered a few easy tasks beforehand. So he said, touch your nose, touch your forehead, do this, touch your belly. And then he delivered the target request of identifying the shape, and we saw increased cooperation. So this is a real-life example of how you can use behavioral momentum. So now that we know what behavioral momentum is and how it looks in practice, let's take a peek at some of the research on this behavioral strategy. So the study that we're going to talk about is a Mace et al. Study from 1988. In the study, data was collected on multiple subjects, and they took data on cooperation with both easy and difficult commands. Data was collected on cooperation with do and don't commands. So demands were delivered with both do this and don't do this. In the study, they had multiple conditions. The conditions they had were baseline, in which only the difficult command was delivered. So kind of referencing back to that video, they would just ask, what shape? Then there was a command where a sequence of easy commands were delivered prior to the difficult demand. They introduced behavioral momentum. The third, where experimenters sat near the subjects and delivered neutral or positive comments before the delivery of the difficult command. So here, no behavioral momentum was introduced. They just had high levels of attention to the individual. And then finally, they looked at the speed in which the commands were delivered and to see if that had an effect. And here's what they found. They found that by delivering those easy commands before the difficult command, they saw increased cooperation. And here's a graph illustrating this point. They started in baseline with don't commands and do commands, and we see some highly variable responding. And then they introduced the medication, but then once they introduced the high probability command sequence, so introducing those easy commands before the more difficult commands, we saw an increase in compliance. So here they had just introduced it with don't, then do, then back to don't, and here with both. And we see more steady, increased cooperation with the high probability command sequence. Time for question number 2. A high probability or high P request is A, an easy request the individual is likely to comply with immediately, B, a new skill you are teaching, C, a request that is difficult for the individual, or D, none of the above. And everyone's right. It is. A high probability request is an easy request that the individual is likely to comply with immediately. Finding number 2 of the study found that attention was not in itself sufficient to occasion cooperation with difficult commands. So what does that mean? That means that commenting on the individual, having casual conversations, delivering compliments, as well as close physical proximity was not sufficient to increase cooperation with difficult tasks. Once the easy demands were delivered before the target difficult demands, that's the only time where we saw an increase in cooperation during the study. So this finding suggests that the presentation of high probability commands is critical to the momentum-like effects that were observed. Finding 3 states that momentum-like effects produced by the easy command sequence appear to depend on the easy commands being delivered in close succession and in close proximity to the difficult command. That means that our commands must be delivered quickly. Pacing with delivering commands and providing immediate and quick reinforcement for the cooperation with those commands are crucial to the success of building momentum and increasing cooperation with difficult commands. The more time between the delivery of demands, the less likely we are to see increased cooperation. So now that we know that delivering a few easy commands before difficult tasks increases compliance, let's talk about how you can use this behavioral momentum. So the steps for using behavioral momentum. 1, you're going to identify 3 requests the person is likely to cooperate with. 2, request that first behavior. Immediately praise and reinforce cooperation with that first request. Then request the second and the third and immediately reinforce cooperation to each. In a similar tone and pace, request the target behavior and immediately praise and reinforce cooperation. And this behavioral momentum strategy is just one of the many strategies that we teach in our safety care curriculum. Time for our third question. How many requests that a person's likely to comply with should you deliver? 0. Always lead with a target request, even when there are signs of agitation. B, 1, C, 3, D, 7. And everyone's right. 3. We want to deliver 3 easy requests before that difficult request. So now that you all have the information you need, let's review some key concepts on behavioral momentum, some things to keep in mind. Behavioral momentum is not very time consuming, and it can be used with any individual at any time. It's important that the high probability commands be commands that the individual can easily and independently complete. In order to make sure that you can deliver a series of easy commands, one of the things you might want to do is create a list of easy commands that you can refer to. Also keep in mind that easy commands can be behaviors that the individual already does without being asked. You want to use behavioral momentum as an antecedent strategy. If an individual is already agitated, it may be necessary to first implement de-escalation strategies. That would be our safety care de-escalation procedures of help, prompt, or wait. When you're using behavioral momentum, be sure to state the commands as statements, not as questions. So you would say, please sit down. You would not say, can you go sit down, please? You also want to provide praise and reinforcement immediately following cooperation for each command. So the final takeaway for this webinar on behavioral momentum. Behavioral momentum is an effective evidence-based antecedent strategy used to increase cooperation. The high probability commands used must be commands that are quick and easy for the individual to complete. You want to state all of your commands as statements, not as questions. The rapid delivery of commands is a crucial component to the effectiveness of behavioral momentum. And also, be sure that you provide praise and reinforcement immediately following cooperation with any command. Here's a list of the research that was referenced in this webinar. And does anybody have any questions? Doesn't look as so. Thank you so much for logging on today for our quick brief on behavioral momentum. We hope that you can use this strategy with the individuals you serve and care for. If you want any more information, please go to our website at www.qbscompanies.com. Thank you so much. Have a good day.